I call this meeting of the Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bradley?
Here.
Ms. Cavill?
Here.
Mr. Creamer?
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Here.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Here. Would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on our agenda, the recommended action is that the board enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specified employees. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Creamer?
No.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. The recommended action is that the Board of Education return to open session. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Bradley?
Here.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Creamer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll begin our recognitions. Dr. Small?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Winkowski, our Director of Athletics and Activities, as we honor some fine gymnasts from Palatine High School tonight.
Board of Education and Dr. Small, thank you for taking some time tonight to honor a really talented team from Palatine High School. Students, as your sponsor introduces you, I'm going to ask that you walk forward, receive your award, and then stand here next to the podium. Additionally, any family members that are here tonight, when your student is introduced, would you please rise and be recognized also? Helping me present tonight's students are Palatine Principal Tony Medina and Athletic Director Luis Arroyo. All right. Mr. Hagel, who's the head gymnastics coach at Palatine, was unable to attend tonight, so he put us in the capable hands of his assistant, Christian Lunsford. So Christian, why don't you come on forward? Christian is an undergraduate student at the University of Iowa studying education. He is an assistant boys and girls gymnastics coach at Palatine, and Christian is also the son of two proud educators and is a proud District 211 graduate of Palatine High School. Christian.
On behalf of the Palatine High School boys gymnastics team, we would like to say thank you to the Board of Education for allowing us to be here this evening. It is an honor and a privilege to be part of an amazing team and family. We came into this season feeling uncertain of the outcome, not knowing what would be in store for us. Even the injury at the beginning of the team competition did not deter us, but rather bring us closer and more determined to end up having an outstanding day by taking third place at the state series. Dealing with adversity, the team stepped up, and 13 out of our 30-spot lineup was filled by our JV team, which is unheard of. Our boys team are also the sectional, conference, and MSL West Division champions. Our JV team is the MSL JV Conference champions, and our freshman, Jeremy, is the MSL Freshman Rings champion. As well as our outstanding team, Coach Hagel was honored with the MSL West Coach of the Year and IHS GCA Coach of the Year. Now, I would like to introduce our athletes and coaches. Freshman, Jeremy Bennett, who is with Lee and Jenny Bennett. He is an all-arounder. On JV, we have junior Rowan Bailey, who is not here tonight. He competed pommel horse, rings, and parallel bars at state. Also, we have junior James Davies, who is not here tonight. He also competed pommel horse, rings, and parallel bars at state. Next, we have junior Jack Hammond, who is with Tim, Lorraine, and Shay. He competed floor and vault. Next, we have sophomore Ivan Monet, who cannot be here tonight. He competed high bar. Next, we have sophomore Jalen Brover, who competed floor and vault at state. Next, we have sophomore Ricardo Vital, who is with Eduardo and Isabel. He competed pommel horse at state. Next, we have sophomore Christian Yanis, who competed vault at state. On varsity, we have senior Carter Christian Holtz, who cannot be here tonight. Due to an injury, he also competed high bar, but would have done all around at state. Next, we have our senior and team captain Nico Denali, who is here with Marla and John Denali. He competed rings, parallel bars, and high bar. Next, we have junior Dominic Feliciano, who is with his mom, Jessie Burdham. He competed all around and also received a third place medal on high bar at the state meet. Next, we have senior Steven Juarez, who cannot be here tonight. He competed floor. And last, we have junior Trey Wilcox, who is with his mom and dad, Kelly and Jeff. He competed all around and is the pommel horse state champion. Our freshman coach is Kurt Bendel, JV is Christian Lunsford, and varsity is Scott Hagel. Again, we would like to say thank you for this recognition, and as always, go Pirates.
And our next recognition is the highest possible composite score on the American College Test, ACT exam.
Every high school student who prepares for college is aware of the importance placed on standardized college entrance exams, including the American College Test, or ACT as we all know it, and the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or SAT as it is commonly called. The highest possible composite score a student can earn on the ACT is 36. Statistically, less than 0.2% of students taking the ACT achieve the highest score. Likewise, the highest possible composite score a student can earn on the SAT is 1,600. And of the nearly 2 million students nationally who take the test each year, less than 300 students achieve this highest possible score across our nation. For more than 20 years, the Board of Education has recognized students who have achieved the highest score for these exams. Tonight, we are excited to recognize and honor 2 District 211 students who have achieved this remarkable accomplishment. A student from Fremd, who earned a 36 on the ACT, and a student from Palatine High School, who not only scored a 36 on the ACT, but also a 1,600 on the SAT. On behalf of the Board of Education and High School District 211, I would like to congratulate these students and let you know that we have a certificate for you that the board president will present to you after you've been introduced by your sponsor. First, Fremd High School Principal and Assistant Superintendent-elect Kurt Tenneper will introduce us to his students, followed by Palatine High School Applied Tech teacher James Shager. Mr. Tenneper.
It's always an honor to stand in front of the Board of Education to present a student who earned a perfect score on the ACT. And today that distinction belongs to Garrick Kung, a rising Fremd senior who is accompanied tonight by his parents, Kendrick and Kitty. Garrick. spoke with Garrick about his perfect score on the ACT, I asked him if he left the exam confident that he earned a 36. He responded that he knew he did well, but was surprised to learn that he got the perfect score. But the perfect score is in no way a surprise to those who know him well. And there's probably no teacher who knows him better than Fremd math and computer science teacher Shannon Denna, who has taught Garrick in multiple computer science classes. She's noticed that Garrick just has a passion for learning, and he's always looking to challenge himself. In Miss Denna's classes, Garrick would often show her the new programming skills he learned on his own within the Java language. Garrick's curiosity and passion for learning can also be seen through his approach to the ACT, where he, instead of using the available resources at Fremd, checked out some books from the library and studied on his own to prepare for the ACT exam. Garrick's academic interests lie in the STEM fields. He lists physics and math courses among his favorites, but his true passion is for computer science. He's already taken 3 computer science courses at Fremd, and next year he will be taking independent computer science with Mrs. Denna. Garrick plans to study computer science after high school, but is yet undecided about the particular university he will attend. No doubt, wherever he decides, the school will be getting themselves a great person and a great student. Garrick, congratulations on your perfect ACT.
Superintendent Lisa Small, District 211 School Board, District 211 Community. It is an honor to be here. It's been quite the year, and it's great to see everyone here. I'd like to welcome Jennifer and Michael Tobin. It's been nice to talk to you guys, and I'd like to introduce, most importantly, Andrew. Andrew, why don't you come on up here? Well, when there was one day, not too long ago, our principal, Tony Medina, came into my classroom all excited, and he came up to me to notify me of Andrew's successes, of scoring perfect scores on the ACT and SAT. Mr. Medina, upon telling me that, I completely fainted in shock and amazement. When I came to, I woke up, Mr. Medina then told me that I was going to present him in front of the school board, which, again, I fainted again. I saw Andrew the next day. I said, what's going on? And he said, well, you know, I passed both exams with perfect scores. And I said, Andrew, I cannot believe that. I said, you know, how did you do it? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, how long did you study? Did you study for quite some time? He goes, a little bit. I was thinking, I said to him, I go, Andrew, when you see things and walk around, do you see things like Iron Man sees things with, like, you know, all digitized? He goes, no, I don't believe him. I got a chance to meet Andrew last year at this time. He was taking my IT fundamentals course, which is a course that preps us for our computer repair class that teaches computer hardware, software, programming, and web-based devices. Unfortunately, we didn't really get a chance to meet in person because it was all online and hybrid. The first time I actually talked to Andrew in person was in March. This class that we take also prepares Andrew to take the A+ certification exam. This is a very technical exam that's given by CompTIA, an organization that recognizes a lot of these technical tests in software and hardware and networking. I got a chance, and Andrew has passed the first of the 2 exams that is offered. And Andrew, did you pass that exam, the first exam? Yes. Andrew, did you pass with a perfect score? I did not. No, he did not. Andrew, how much did you study for this exam? A lot. Which then makes me realize that Andrew is not Tony Stark, nor is he Iron Man. Okay. What Andrew is a very humble young man. He's a young man that works very hard, is dedicated. He is down to earth and grounded. He's always willing to talk to his teachers as well as his students, his fellow students, and he comes in ready to learn. What's amazing about this, as you guys heard, is that Andrew has successfully done both the SAT and SAT in perfect score. Andrew, since 1998, from the records that have been shown, you have been only one of 6 students to have accomplished this. Okay?
Wow.
Yes, wow, yes, that's what And did you know, Andrew, that during that time, you were the first from Palatine High School to do that? Very exciting, Andrew. Well, on behalf of Lisa Small, District 211 School Board, the District 211 community, your family, Principal Tony Medina, we congratulate you on this wonderful success, and we look forward to what you're going to succeed in next. Andrew, congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you to all of our students. Thank you to the families for being here. Thank you for supporting your students in both the athletics and in the academics. At this point, we're going to continue with the business portion of our meeting, and our guests are welcome to leave at this time, or you're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting.
Oh, we need to take one picture.
Oh, could you? All right, before our students leave, we would like to take a picture, so we're going to pause for a moment.
So if the gymnasts could come on up to the risers and we'll take a picture. And then our, have you?
At this time, our next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board that did not sign in on the speaker's sheet? If so, please raise your hand and we'll add your name to it. Okay. The board welcomes you and are pleased to listen to your comments this evening. It's important that you know this is a public board meeting and not a dialogue, so the board members will not be responding to your comments or answering questions at this time. As a reminder, the board meeting is being taped and live streamed. We ask that you value the procedures and decorum of our meeting and be respectful of those at the podium so they may be heard. When I call your name, please come forward to the podium and state your name for the record. Though not required, you may state if you are a resident of the district. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. You will receive a notification when you have 1 minute remaining. Any individual's unused time or place in order may not be deferred to another individual. If you wish a response from the superintendent, please leave your name and phone number with Mr. Teneper. He's at the end. We had a request for speakers to remove their mask when they speak for clarity. That is going to be strictly up to the board member and their comfort level of removing their mask. But we will try to speak as clearly as we can. Okay. The first speaker that I have here on the sign-up sheet is Laura. There was no last name. Laura, would you please come to the podium?
Hello, my name is Laura, and I have a son at Fremd High School. I am here to speak regarding the mask mandates put in place for District 211. I am asking you to unmask all District 211 children now. our neighbors across our northern border in Illinois, from Illinois to Wisconsin, the Kenosha Unified School District just had voted unanimously to loosen some of their COVID-19 safety protocols. No more mask mandates for the 21,000 students in the Kenosha Unified School District. You can find all the details at kenoshanews.com. So mask wearing in Kenosha schools is now optional, as it should be here at District 211. The state of Vermont just mandated students no longer are required to wear masks or socially distance this summer or fall in school. Source, it's mynbc5.com. Data from the CDC indicates COVID-19 presents near zero hospitalizations or death risk to every child, teen, and college student in this country. Again, zero death risk or hospitalizations for children, teens, and college students. Wearing a mask should not be required. It should be optional. Again, optional. Mask wearing is dangerous. Mask wearing during indoor sports like basketball is dangerous. My son plays basketball at Front High School. He's required to wear a mask and run back and forth, and he's sweating, and he's got to change his mask during a game. And this was during the fall, and now in the summer. He's also in basketball. Speaking of that, just the other day, according to From High School varsity coach Bob Wodlowski, parents and fans are not allowed at summer league games. Why were parents allowed to attend basketball games in winter 2020, but not summer 2021? Why can I not watch my son play a basketball game? All right, so back to mask wearing being dangerous. So masks have been worn and they contain pathogens. A study was recently done in Florida where parents took their masks of their children and took them to a lab. The results found that all the masks, every single mask, contained bacteria, parasites, fungi, and half were found to have dangerous pneumonia-causing bacteria. Forcing our District 211 children to wear masks all day puts their health in jeopardy. Prior to April of 2020, masks were never recommended for respiratory viruses, as there is no science to support it. Again, no science to support masks work to stop COVID virus. Stop forcing kids and teens to cover their faces in school. It's delusional, abusive, and immoral. Mask mandates have been permanently lifted in many states in the U.S., and I'm asking you to lift the mask mandate for District 211 students. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is Sherry Erlacher.
Hi, Sherry Erlacher. I do have 2 children enrolled in D211 from high school. Today, our governor tweeted at 3:25 news, with more than 70% of adults in Illinois vaccinated. I'm proud that we're the first state in the Midwest to reach Biden's goal. Does that sound like guidance? If 15% of Illinoisans have had COVID, which that's what the numbers say, and we are at 85%, is that not herd immunity? Really, we only need 62% to have herd immunity, according to science. So when will you stop speaking about guidance? Masks are now laughable and unenforceable. Time to stop pretending that you have the power to enforce the masks, because you do not. When will you change your language to optional? Because legally, that's all it is. Many parents are already researching and hiring legal counsel should you continue to intimidate and try and force masks. It's not just a few of us objecting to this anymore, there are hundreds of us. They may not be showing up to every school board meeting, but we are actively meeting and strategizing. Please show us the language in the administrative code that gives any district the authority to implement and enforce these guidelines. I've read the entire thing, I can't find it. Title 23. How will they be enforced in the fall? Will all our children be sent home when they show up to school without a mask? You plan on asking for vaccine status? Are we Germany? I don't think so. We have organized, we've spoke to a list of attorneys, we've educated ourselves on current relevant laws, we know our rights, so our children will be exercising them in the fall. They will not be wearing masks to school. It has been more than a year. There is no emergency, and your guidance, as well as the governor's guidance, is 100% unenforceable. We do not consent. Our children do not consent. We do not consent to the masks, the contact tracing, the health screen questions, and we will not consent to the vaccine. Now, about the perverted sex education curriculum. Why do 11-year-olds need to learn how to open and use a condom? And then educated on which places of the body they can be used in. Have you seen the videos they will use to teach some of this? I can provide them for you if you haven't. It is porn in the form of cartoons. Why must sixth graders define bisexual, lesbian, gay, queer, two-spirit, asexual, pansexual, I don't even know what some of these are, or vaginal, oral, and anal sex? Then they must also learn and be able to describe pregnancy options, including abortion. What type of sick minds think that this is okay for any age, much less grade school?
Please contain yourself so she has her proper time to speak.
I've got
Thank
all
you.
the time I need, thank you. Why do third graders, usually 8 or 9-year-olds, need common human sexual development, including masturbation, explained to them? How do you plan on explaining and teaching an 8-year-old how to play with himself properly? Who will show them if they're doing it wrong? Will there be touching,
You have 1 minute
videos,
remaining.
pictures? All of this is a crime, by the way. Why is this board so eager to desensitize our youth to sex, to touching? This is more like grooming, and you should be ashamed. Why is this curriculum filled with language of gender expression and gender identity and sexual orientation? What happened to science and biology? When can D to 11 get back to the basics? You have all been preaching science, science, science for the last year. Why are you now entertaining a curriculum that goes against science? How do you choose what part of their education will include science and what science you will willfully ignore because feelings? This sex ed curriculum is criminal. Showing porn to a minor is a crime, and I hope all who participate have criminal charges filed against them as employees of the district and as individuals off the clock. Thank you.
The next speaker is Kristen Steele.
Hi, I'm Kristen Steele. I have 2 children now in District 211 and one formerly in 54 as we pulled him to be in a private school. I will start with saying that I am exhausted of all of this. I'm tired of feeling like I am constantly fighting for things that I have absolutely no need to fight for because we live in America. The ability to breathe freely, ability for my kids to go to school, the ability to say what goes into and on my kids' bodies, as well as what they learn. But unfortunately, I have to fight, and I will keep fighting no matter how exhausting it is. That's because my children are worth it, and every single student in D211, D54, D15 are worth it. The sad part is that the 8 of you seem to not agree that our students are worth it. So here I stand, and I will continue to stand. I would like to ask you, Dr. Small, when will you take a leadership role and actually formulate a plan that is in the best interest of our children? And when will the Board of Education hold our superintendent to task? Up to this point, there has been little to no leadership. I, among others, write emails, ask for response, ask questions, I share data, I consult with attorneys, and all of it seems to fall on deaf ears with little to no response, or a response that is filled with meaningless words of zero value. Is this because you have nothing else to say besides we follow IDPH and ISBE guidance? To me, that's not an answer. That's not data. It's an excuse. What the IDPH and ISBE have tried to hold schools to are guidelines. That is it. They're not law. They are not enforceable in a court of law, and they have no consequence if not followed. Not even the dreaded threat of the state will withhold funding. All in all, there is no leadership, and that is sad. What is not sad, though, is that I am far from alone. There are thousands that stand behind me. Even the mainstream media is hearing us now. We will not stop. The House Bill 2789 that parents worked hard to kill and the teachers union and the likes of Michelle Mussman worked hard to pass is now dead. That is because we did not stop. We will do the same with SB 818, the sex education bill. I will not speak of this because firstly, it makes my guts hurt thinking about what would be taught to my kids, specifically my 7-year-old. But my point in bringing both of these bills up is because I have not heard one thing from any of you as far as advocating against these bills, from our district or from any of you individually. I've only heard silence, and silence is not leadership. With all that said, I will move on and say masks must be optional for our children now. There is no reason to even ask them to mask. Every single adult has had the opportunity to have a vaccination. Even our wonderful governor just said today, as Sherry has said, that we have reached 70% vax rate. You all know the data about children. I will not spend my time speaking about that either. I will spend my time telling you that my kids will not come to school in the fall masked, and that every child in our district and feeder districts should have that same option without the fear of being discriminated against. We're talking about equity tonight, right? I want my children to come to school unmasked and not be discriminated against. This must happen now. During all sports, indoor and outdoor, during school, band, chorus, theater, all the time, mask optional with no conditions and no discrimination. The time is far past now to actually take a leadership role and do what is right by our kids. One of the foremost thought leaders in children's medical care, Lurie's Children's Hospital, said today that they are overwhelmed with a wait list of over 1,800 kids needing to be treated. This is the real pandemic, mental health in our youth. It is crazy to me to think how parents have stood before you guys begging for something to be done and change to happen months ago. So much so that even somebody from the Board of Education, Ms. Cavill, chastised a parent in a board meeting for what she had said. Mental health for our youth is the pandemic, not COVID. And that is on the adults, all of you, for not stepping up, for not following what is a guideline, for isolating the kids without giving them a choice, for putting fear into them that is not needed. It is my hopes that we can come out of this on the other side and be okay, but it is going to take a long while and more time and resources than we have or ever think we need right now. But again, I will continue to stand and I will continue to fight. I will say this again, masks must be optional for our kids without discrimination. Other districts are doing this, they are taking a stand, and D211, D54, and D15 must do the same now. Thank you.
Stacy Gale. Stacy Gale.
Hello, my name is Stacy Gale. I've got 2 children and 2 11. I listened last at a recent meeting regarding your SAT prep as curriculum. I request the administration include SAT prep in each junior level English class and junior level math class. A weekly lesson in each class on test-taking strategies will ensure all students are prepared. FREMD already has a curriculum they've used, and prior to last year, implemented it during lunch. Last year, instructional minutes were reduced, and the administration assured all of us parents that our children did not suffer academically. Use some of those minutes for SAT prep. I request the SAT committee to include representatives from parents, staff, board members, and students, as was done for the Wellness Committee. I request the administration add Senate Bill 818 to the next meeting. I would like the administration to provide information on how SB 818, if signed into law, will impact the wellness curriculum. I'd like to remind the board members their role is guidance and oversight of the administration. The school board approves curriculum. Ms. Cavill, it is not your role to dictate instruction. If you want that role and responsibility, you should pursue a career in administration. I too would like to ask this board and administrators to be leaders. There's no need to wait any longer for guidance. Review what has worked and confidently move forward with a plan, knowing it is your responsibility. When developing your plan, I ask you to consider the whole child and how your decisions will impact students and staff. Masks should be optional for all. Do not require your staff to be the mask or vaccine police. Let them teach, develop relationships, and build trust with students. Half the students entering your buildings next year will be new. They will be excited and anxious. Do not compound their anxiety or hinder their ability to develop relationships with multiple trusted adults by dividing by vaccination status. Students are fearful of being judged or, even worse, canceled. Make a policy for all, regardless of vaccination status. Thank you.
Next is Jessica Hinkle.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Hinkle. I have a student at Schaumburg High School. My comments are in regards to Dr. Small's request for an contract extension. When considering this request, please considering the following. Her contract is performance-based, just as our students' grades are supposed to be performance-based. And this year, it's obvious, performance has been difficult to evaluate. Well, except for the 2 students that were perfect score achievers. With this year being consumed by COVID, parents and students were forced to live in a world of indecision, inconsistencies, and basically lacking focus on academics and students' well-being. There was a consensus among teachers, parents, and students that we cannot determine our students' performance based on the end of 2019-2020 and all of 2020-21 school years. I think the same can and should be said of our determining Dr. Small's performance. As a reminder, the board is expected to act on behalf of the community. Regardless of your personal feelings of Dr. Small's performance, this abnormal year does not provide enough data to support an extension. If you're still considering the extension, here's a review of this past year. We cherry-picked COVID guidances to follow, indecision and last-minute changes with how the beginning of the school year was to start, the district info system being hacked, allowing vulgar emails and calls to be sent out, lack of focus on student mental health, lack of proactive planning for the shift to hybrid learning, lack of proactive planning for the return to school after Christmas, last-minute changes to the teacher's return after Christmas, lack of proactively addressing SAT prep inequities, slow reaction to the students' concerns about sexual misconduct within our schools, delayed responses to Harper Promise requirement confusion, Harper Promise letters being sent to the wrong student with the wrong student info, unnecessary last-minute changes to graduation planning, allowing gross inconsistencies amongst the proms that were put out, allowing gross inconsistencies amongst COVID protocol for sports and activities, convocation ceremonies, having inconsistencies and inaccuracies, actually leaving out some of our top performers, delayed and confusing summer school planning, and the list goes on. In any other year, I would consider this list would result in a termination of a contract. But with this being a year, the year that it was, we should just let it slide and take the wait and see approach as our administration has done all school year. Please don't take this as an attack on Dr. Small. I think she should be given another chance after this crazy year to reach her goals that were set in the contract and prove that she deserves an extension after a normal school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kim Pinkerman. Kim Pinkerman. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kim Pinkerman. I am a parent of 3 children that will all be at Fremd High School this summer. We live in Palatine. I am here directly to discuss with you and all of you in this room of my concern over HB 818. I think that this bill, and I have read it, for any of you that have not in this room, I actually brought a breakdown. I bought 5 copies so that you all can see at every different level from kindergarten through 12th grade, how this will affect all of our children because we all have kids at different ages. I also, just so you know, will be talking to Lori Hines and to District 15 about it also, and I will be talking to District 54. Also, the sex bill is, so that all of you know here, it is actually based off of the National Sex Education Standards. It is a 72-page document. I can email it to you. If you read it, it's pretty much a nice little graph that describes all of the disgusting things that this bill would like our children to learn. Yes. Okay. Anyhow, I do not believe that this bill is I do not believe that this is a health curriculum for kids K through 12. I believe that this is a radical agenda to indoctrinate our children. And no, Kim, specifically to you, I've been watching you on Twitter, and this is not Republican rhetoric, it is fact. Would you want, and I'm going to ask this to all of you, and I'm going to ask this to all of you that are in this room, who in their right mind would want this disgusting agenda passed on to any of their children or their grandchildren? Again, here's another case, in fact, and I am very sorry for anybody who's watching this. My own children are in this room, and I have showed them this, and they were disgusted beyond belief that children of 11-year-olds would use this. This is Chicago Public Schools, Sexual Health Education, grade 6. And again, I'm sorry for anybody that's listening to the live broadcast of this. The female condom can also be used for anal sex, and it tells you how to insert it and use it. I bought 35 copies. I will leave them, or I will hand them out. Here, I will hand them out to you, and you guys can all pass them around. Under no circumstances would anybody want this in anything to do with their children. This bill degrades our children. This bill divides our children. This bill keeps our children from focusing on their schoolwork, their futures, and it keeps them fighting and butting heads like we saw them during COVID and the election and racism and Republicans and Democrats. They don't need that. These children just need to go to school. They need to learn basic things, math, English, science. That is your job up here. Please stop the madness and protect our children. And if you all won't, I will have the option, and I will have to protect my children myself. Now, let's switch gears. Any of you that are teachers in this room, I have no idea. If you are, I'm sorry. What do you honestly think the impact of having to teach this agenda to students will honestly do to impact these children, or to these teachers? Have you thought about mentally what it will do to them? Have you thought about the pushback that these teachers will get from parents like me or any of us in this room that are gonna sit and call and say, why are you teaching my kids this? You are not allowed to do this. I vote no for HB 818 in District 211. I vote no for it in District 54, and I vote no for it in District 15. I will also expect and demand that all of you, as being elected officials by us, the people, that you all stand up for our children. Do not let this crap be anywhere near our
1
children,
minute
and
remaining.
please keep it out of our school. I also ask you all, please email Governor Pritzker, your reps, which is Messman and Schomburg, Crespo, and Morrison, who voted no for this, by the other way. The other two did. And tell them we do not want this here. And just in case, if you all won't do it, we all in this room will do it. I also ask that this bill be added to the minutes or to the agenda so that parents do understand exactly what this is and how you are all going to combat this and keep this away from our children. I appreciate your time. Thank you all very much.
Okay, ma'am, if you want to pass those out, I would ask if you would do that, outside the door, because we are going to continue with our business portion of the meeting. So we will continue. Our next presentation is the District 211 Equity Plan. Yeah, Dr. Small, please go ahead.
This past year, the District 211 Equity Team has openly and diligently worked to create a plan at the district level to support the equity work already happening at each school. Each month over this past year, the board has received updates on the progress of the team, and some of the board members have served as subcommittee liaisons. My sincere gratitude to the work of the entire team, some of whom are with us tonight, and others who are watching via the live stream. The honest and open conversations that were had are an important launching point for our district-level work surrounding equity. Thank you for embracing the conversations and being a part of this district-level journey. The environment of our school community continues to be enhanced by our work towards ensuring each student's needs are met so they can fully access opportunities in our school in a safe and supportive environment. Tonight, Josh, Julie, Lydia, and Prashanth are here tonight to share the beginning of the District 211 Equity journey. It is my honor to join these four members of the District 211 Equity team tonight to summarize the key components of the work, which is detailed in the recommended District 211 Equity Plan within board docs. Josh?
Thank you, Dr. Small. Tonight we have the opportunity to share with you part of the educational equity journey experienced by the District 211 Equity team as we have collectively worked to organize the systematic change process that is necessary to transform District 211 into a more culturally and racially equitable school district. Over the past several years, we have built a solid foundation due to the work of our individual schools, and this year we've continued to grow in our committee to ensure educational equity for all students. Our past and continued success is linked with the commitment of our staff, students, parents, and of course you, as our Board of Education, to ensure that equity is a mindset and a lens through which we view our commitment to the community. Tonight we are joined by representatives from our District 211 Equity team. We are honored that they are part of the team and grateful that they are here with us this evening to share some of their experience. And if I could just go off script for 1 second and tell you how excited I am to present with these students here tonight that are from our schools. They are amazing humans, and they are very brave to get up here tonight in front of you and share their experiences and their perceptions of equity within 211. Tonight you will hear from Fremd High School rising senior Prashanth Ramakandra, recently graduated Schomburg High School student Lydia Schultz, and Conant High School principal Julie Novak. Prashanth and Lydia were student members of the District 211 Equity team, and they both played a pivotal role in developing the priorities and belief statements for their committees. Mrs. Novak co-facilitated the Equitable Curriculum and Instruction Committee as a co-chair and serves as the principal of Conant High School. Our presentation agenda includes 4 areas of focus as they relate to equity in District 211. The first includes the history of our equitable practices and the background of the District 211 Equity team. From there, we will hear from Prashant, Lydia, and Ms. Novak about their experiences as members of the District 211 Equity Team from the past year. I will then share with you pertinent information from the themes found during Phase 1 of our Cultural and Equity Audit, and we will end with specific examples of priorities and belief statements from our District 211 Equity Plan, as well as our next steps to move forward and implement this plan. We have a rich history of equitable practices in District 211. Our individual schools have been on an equity journey for several years in an effort to ensure that all students feel safe, welcome, and valued. Each school has made progress towards lowering disproportionate rates of discipline referrals and consequences, while also increasing the enrollment of underrepresented students in rigorous coursework, including AP classes. Highlights of the work include Palatine High School's work to increase the graduation rate for Hispanic male students, Conant High School's work towards achieving equity and excellence by focusing on opportunity and belonging, Schaumburg High School's student listening sessions, Fremd High School's focus on trauma-responsive strategies, and Hoffman Estates High School's charge to enroll more traditionally underrepresented students in advanced placement courses. The District 211 Equity Team was formed to ensure the collaboration and connection between the aforementioned equity work that was being accomplished at our individual schools, as well as to develop a district-wide framework for equity that could be used to drive short-term and long-term improvement efforts. Please know that we are not saying that we haven't been doing the work in the past, because we have, and we also have been accomplishing success. Rather, we are committed to strengthening and solidifying our efforts for continued success in the future. The members of the equity team believe that equity is a fundamental concept central to student access, opportunity, and achievement. You may have heard the term achievement gap in the past used in relation to schools. As we have researched and analyzed both our own systems and the broader educational system, it is more than just about achievement. It is also about access and opportunity. Our mindset is such that equity is not something that we talk about, but rather something that is intrinsic to the values and beliefs of our community. As it currently stands, the demographic makeup of District 211 includes 42.5% of our student population as white, 26.4% of our student population as Hispanic, 21.6% of our student population as Asian, and 9.2% of our student population are Black or multiracial students. We have a very diverse district, with some of our individual school demographics representing even more diverse ratios. While our firm foundation is that equity is a mindset and a lens through which we want our staff to view every aspect of what we do in District 211, it is also helpful to have a shared common definition of equity as we move forward. For this definition, we will use the definition of equity developed by the Illinois Association of School Boards, one used during the training that you took part of. The definition states that educational equity means that every student has access to the educational resources and rigor they need at the right moment in their education, and students' needs are not going unmet due to race, ethnicity, dominant language, disability, gender, sexual orientation, religion, family background, and/or family income. Key terms from this that have driven our work as a team include access to educational resources and rigor, the right moment in their education, and making sure that needs are not going unmet due to any factor related to who they are as humans.
Our District 211 Equity Team was created in August and charged with the following. Number 1, listening to our community by including and affirming the voices of students, staff, and families. 2, defining the organizational priorities and practices that contribute to equity in D211. 3, analyzing qualitative and quantitative data to identify goals, metrics, and accountability measures. And lastly, creating a vision for moving forward through an equity plan that will drive systematic short-term and long-term change. While we started our first meeting in the middle of a pandemic, we were still able to meet in person, with masks and social distancing, of course, to begin to form the trust necessary to have crucial conversations about equity. These conversations can sometimes be uncomfortable, not knowing how to say something, not knowing the appropriate words to use, finding the courage to be vulnerable with what we know, and even more, what we don't know. In order to set ourselves up for success, We began with 4 foundational assumptions that helped to form our culture and provided guidance for our collective work. These foundational assumptions included: equity is not an initiative, but rather a mindset that we integrate into our lives and school communities. This set the stage for the fact that we weren't just planning for a one-year initiative, but rather to instill a collective mindset about our work as educators. We will focus on a strengths-based approach, which focuses on the inherent strengths of individuals, families, groups, and organizations within our community, because too many times in the past, we have applied a deficit-based approach to initiatives, rather than starting with strengths. And we seek to use research, evidence, and data to create short-term and long-term strategies. We reviewed a host of research and resources during our planning phase, and we will use evidence and data as we move into the implementation phase. Finally, we will acknowledge that equity work is sometimes difficult work, but we will tend towards a growth mindset and persistence in our efforts, and we ask that you join us in that frame of mind tonight.
I had the great fortune to serve as co-subcommittee leader for curriculum and instruction with Elizabeth Sheehan, who teaches English at Palatine High School. The Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee is one of 4 equity subcommittees that included parents, teachers, administrators, board members, and most importantly, our students. The subcommittees met on a regular basis, at least monthly, throughout the entire 2021 school year. It was not uncommon for our committee to see each other 2 to 3 times a month in our small group and then at our large district meetings. What I appreciated most about our subcommittee is that we were diverse in terms of race, roles, experiences, and expertise. And every committee member was extremely passionate about achieving equity in our curriculum and instruction. As you can imagine, it was critical that our team feel comfortable and safe to engage in these discussions. We established working agreements with the goal of creating a safe and supportive committee environment. Some of our decisions included agreements to call all committee members by their first names, encourage everyone to share ideas freely. We committed to elevating topics that came up to the larger committee or other subcommittees if the topic was not specific to curriculum and instruction. We even had a plan for how we would respond to ouch moments, or moments when something was said that was hurtful or needed to be worked through. It was the process of establishing our why that supported our development from strangers with different roles to a team that shared our experiences and expertise. We offered suggestions, frustrations, hope, and a commitment to a more equitable educational experience for all students. It cannot go without saying that it was our students, Leslie, Lydia, and Ari, who shared experiences, both positive and negative, and thoughts that offered the most valuable insight when we established our why. They reminded the adults on the committee of the tremendous value of student voice, student agency, and the need for all of us to listen. They shared experiences and insight that were powerful, humbling, and they led us to our why, which is crafted as follows. We believe in equitable curriculum and instruction to break the predictable cycle of who succeeds and who does not succeed, to show students windows and mirrors, the ability to see themselves and those who are not like them in their curricular experiences, to explore to what extent our curricular and instructional decisions are made with equity as the driving force and what is needed to support that effort in the future, and to explore our capacity to implement culturally responsive instructional strategies. Prashant will share more about his experience as a student on the Equitable Practices and Mindset Subcommittee.
Thank you, Ms. Novak. It's a pleasure to be in front of the Board of Education today. I hope this sets a precedent where students like me, from different and diverse backgrounds, have the opportunity to speak in front of you freely so that they have a voice in the important changes that you make. As students, we are usually on the receiving end of the work done by parents involved in our school community and policies enacted by the Board of Education. The equity team has made my voice feel heard, and with my knowledge of my school experience, and more importantly, those of other students, especially those that are underrepresented by our schools, I spoke my truth on behalf of those fellow students. One experience that really solidified our success as a team was our first equity team meeting. The first activity that we had was sharing why equity was important to us and what we could accomplish as a team. I was strongly rooted in the conviction that change needed to happen immediately, given various examples of how inequalities and inaction worked to hinder progress, and that with the power and responsibility that we all held, that it would certainly be possible to make change. Additionally, I noticed that we were all united in the same ideals of justice, equity, and progress. When we are all commonly united in these goals, the potential for change is amazing, and the equity team utilizes to make fantastic changes. I felt well represented by the equity team's process, both at large and in subcommittee meetings. Especially during subcommittee meetings, administrators and parents would especially count on the insights of fellow students before we could continue with proposing additions to policies or adjusting our approach to equity. One very large strength of the equity team was the establishment of norms in subcommittees, some being speaking our truth, expecting and accepting non-closure, maintaining empathy, and being vulnerable. These norms created a safe space for uncomfortable conversations and dialogues, as well as personal experiences. I was able to communicate my experience at Fremd, interconnecting my personal observations with those of other students. One large area of personal experience that I was able to draw upon was the lack of accountability or mechanisms for reporting instances of hate and prejudice. I found that current mechanisms, such as surveys and follow-ups to instances of prejudice, did not adequately address the needs of those who encountered these injustices. Additionally, the simultaneousness of AP culture and barriers for ESL students' achievement was very evident to me and many other students. While AP culture pressures students into taking classes that they might not feel personally compelled to take, ESL students that want to take higher classes are given little opportunities to pursue advanced and AP courses. Furthermore, the visual appearance of Fremd and other D211 schools in their current states do not reflect the diversity of students and families in the community, and there are not enough opportunities to celebrate the beautiful diversity of students, families, and the administration. These are just a few examples that I was able to communicate about my Fremd experience. I have personally grown from this experience by giving myself an opportunity to be on the front lines on this battle against injustice. I've opened my eyes to the experiences and needs of diverse members of our community and recognized the barriers that they have faced. Working with others united in this cause of equity, I was able to build my understanding and vision of equity from what others have shared. Most importantly, by having the capacity to make change with this proposal here today, I've been inspired to persistently fight for equity in all its forms and preserve this necessary dynamic for generations to come. Moving on. One exceptionally important area that I was a part of, especially working in the Equitable Practices and Mindset Subcommittee, was with employment matters, namely development, recruitment, the application and interview process, and retention. Our central goal was to develop and implement recruitment and employment practices that build a diverse workforce while creating and supporting an equity mindset for all. Our belief statements are as follows. We believe that equity mindsets develop the agency of the school community to build upon diversity and to enhance understanding, that equity provides the opportunity for each person to feel like a valued part of the learning community, that District 211 should seek to diversify our staff so that our staff more closely represents the students we serve, and that representation is critical, and that students and the school community benefit when they have opportunities to interact with diverse staff. Diverse staff and administration are exceptionally important parts of our school environment, and this cannot be understated. From my own observation, there is a great disparity in the diversity of staff. More than just the staff, this lack of diversity has an impact on all involved in this educational community. Because when we lack diverse staff, diverse perspectives are sparse, and the uncomfortable conversations and dialogues that we can have as a result are too limited. We must actively take this opportunity to revise employment practices to build a diverse staff. The perspectives and insights that diverse educators can bring to the table will benefit students and staff alike and can uplift the school environment as a whole.
As part of the Equitable Curriculum and Instruction Committee, our first priority is to ensure that all curriculum, curricular materials, supplemental materials, activities, and instructional grading practices are reflective of our diverse student population. Throughout all of our equity team meetings, every conversation was centered around the fact that every student is different. We all come from different backgrounds, belong to different cultures, and undergo different experiences. Learning new content is already pretty difficult. And when this content continuously fails to connect with and even dishonors your own background and identity, learning becomes infinitely more challenging, and any desires to learn more are completely eradicated. In my personal experience throughout school, it was rare that I ever saw, heard, or even discussed materials that reflected who I am as a Chinese American. There were no lessons celebrating my culture, and none of the materials ever came from a person of my ethnicity. And as a result, I felt not only that others didn't appreciate my identity, but that I couldn't either. Because if others didn't embrace who I am, how could I? For this reason, it's absolutely imperative that students see themselves positively and equitably represented. As District 211, we need to ensure that through a culturally responsive teaching and identity-affirming environment, we honor and amplify every student's voice, inclusive of disability, ethnicity, gender, gender expression, gender identity, immigration status, language, nationality, family status, race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or association with a person or group. We chose to list all of these identifying traits to ensure that no student is deprived of an equitable education.
Another priority our committee established is the importance of having safe and supportive learning environments free from racism and discrimination. A safe and supportive environment means all students are seen and heard, and teachers actively seek to know their students first as people, honoring their identities. In this environment, learning is prioritized over compliance, and students feel comfortable participating in a state of relaxed alertedness. This is the space where learners are allowed to flourish. Often those outside of education think of teachers as content experts, and while they certainly are, the secret sauce for excellent teaching is how we develop supportive learning spaces. A math teacher teaches students math. They do not teach math to students. There is a difference, and that is the art of teaching. In supportive learning spaces, teachers maintain high expectations, empower students academically, and have what we described as unbridled optimism that students wish to reach those expectations, regardless of past performance or perceived effort, even when circumstances may be complicated. No matter what, students feel supported and able to excel and try hard things. In supportive learning spaces, teachers purposefully differentiate to make learning accessible and relevant. Teachers leverage asset-based thinking and eschew deficit thinking. These culturally responsive teaching strategies, which are excellent teaching practices for all students, are not magic, and they don't require extraordinary measures. They require the ability to build a community of learners and intentional reflection on practices to ensure that students' social emotional learning needs are met. This cycle of intentional reflection allows us to review traditional practice and adjust them in ways that are meaningful and relevant to our students.
Even though the four of us have the privilege of presenting to you this evening, there were hundreds of humans in our District 211 community that provided feedback to help us create this plan. As you know, our team progressed through several different phases of work during the last year. One of those phases was to gather feedback from our community. As we planned this phase, it became clear to us that we would need to engage the assistance of an outside organization in order to ensure that that feedback was unbiased by creating safe spaces for students and parents to share their experiences and perceptions. We are grateful that you supported the work of B. Young Associates to conduct Phase 1 of our Equity and Cultural Audit. Through the focus groups in Phase 1, we were able to see some initial themes emerge. Although we will still need the feedback from our staff, which is part of Phase 2, there are several areas we want to highlight tonight. These include our parents and students were very appreciative that we created the opportunity for them to share their experiences. In addition, many mentioned hope about the potential changes that could come from the equity plan. One of the other themes that we saw is that there are different perspectives related to the sense of safety and belonging from students and parents of different races and ethnicities in our schools. Additionally, students and parents from different races and ethnicities feel differently about our disciplinary practices and our academic opportunities. The fourth theme was the need for a culturally appropriate and diverse curriculum was universally mentioned across all groups, while the desire for a more diverse staff, which represents the student body more closely, was also strongly stated. Finally, students and parents highlighted the importance of mental health supports for all students, and the mindset of our staff towards concepts of race and equity remain important subjects that we continue and improve. The components that are in the equity plan include the themes and feedback from the parent and student focus groups. Before the equity team started their work, we had a picture of what the final plan might look like. The final plan that you have before you tonight is very different from the original concept. What you see tonight, we ultimately termed priorities. There are 16 total, accounting for the 4 priorities related to each of our equity committees. These committees represent critical areas of school functioning, including curriculum, behavior, academic opportunity, and parent and family connections. Within each of the 16 priorities are 3 to 4 belief statements, which will guide both our district and school-based work moving forward. At the end of tonight's presentation, we will talk about the next steps, including how we will operationalize the priorities and beliefs. But first, Lydia Prashant and Ms. Novak will share with you the journey to develop these priorities and beliefs.
The Equitable Curriculum and Instruction Committee's third priority is to increase student engagement with culturally responsive instruction that leverages students' existing funds of knowledge and builds intellectual capacity towards independence. In my subcommittee's discussions, we talked about what makes students dependent versus independent learners. Why do some students take charge of their education while others struggle to? Of course, this question is complicated and doesn't have a single definitive answer. However, it can't be denied that the systems in our society create advantages for some, while others are faced with far more barriers. In order to break this cycle of those who succeed and those who don't, and for us students to truly reach higher levels of critical thinking, engage with the content, and become independent learners, materials and instruction have to be continuously adaptable and culturally responsive for everyone. We need to meet students where they are, which may look different for every individual, to effectively cultivate intellectual curiosity and build upon students' mental capacities, instead of solely focusing on increasing workload and rigor, which in itself does not promote deep learning or critical thinking skills. The work that the D211 Equity Team has been doing for the past 9 months is part of this process of breaking down the systematic barriers that put students at an unfair disadvantage. I am so proud to have been part of this experience during my senior year of high school, and I especially appreciate each one of my subcommittee members who have supported me throughout this journey and motivated me to use my voice. And now, I would like to use it to express my gratitude to be part of such pivotal work, and I hope continues for many years to come.
Before I start in discussing school climate and culture, I'd like to give a special thanks to Faith Massey from Conan High School, who has recently graduated, who has been absolutely pivotal in the discussion that we are about to have. Pertaining to priority number 3, the Equitable Practices and Mindsets Committee responded to school climate and culture. Our focus on school climate and culture revolves around making our schools safer and more inclusive for our diverse student bodies, allowing students to succeed academically, extracurricularly, socially, and emotionally. The belief statements for school culture and logistics are as follows. We believe that every student, family, staff, and community member should be welcomed, empowered, and proudly represented by their school and the broader District 211 community. We believe in the importance of recognizing and celebrating the beautiful diversity in our District 211 schools, and we believe in identifying, analyzing, and eliminating access, opportunity, and achievement gaps that could cause inequity in our schools. The core tenet behind our belief statements is the belief that equity benefits us all. Appreciating diversity, establishing trust, recognizing unjust systems, and providing support to students, especially those with diverse needs, will uplift the educational environment for all. I'd like to stress again, equity will provide a benefit to everyone. Even actions as simple as updating the appearance of schools to represent the diversity of the student body will go a long way in fostering appreciation and celebration of diversity. This is just one of many examples that we have the potential to act on. By targeting these particular aspects of the school environment, equity will be significantly strengthened, and so will our school's capacity to appreciate and uphold it.
Because curriculum is what we teach and instruction is how we teach it, a somewhat unexpected priority for the Curriculum and Instruction Committee was realizing the importance of incorporating indicators of equity in our regular systematic review of our course placement practices, acceleration practices, and articulation with our sender districts. Despite sincere efforts and even a district goal for students to move out of developmental classes as early as possible, we know that many students can end where they begin in terms of course levels. Culturally responsive practices can be incorporated into placement practices to supplement or even supplant traditional methods of course placement. Our committee recognized the need to review systems that, despite the very best intentions, and even in order to meet federal and state mandates, can be unintentionally rooted in biases. For example, it's an unfortunate truth that within public education in the United States, students for whom English is a second language can be regarded with a deficit mindset. This creates an invisible barrier where our actions follow our thinking, which leads to a negative educational experience when systems are built on what students cannot do instead of what they can do. While it's necessary and right to offer ESL programming, our systematic approach to reviewing ESL includes making sure that we celebrate and highlight our students' culture and language. This must happen not only within the ESL environment, but as an entire learning community. This is only one example of how we can combat these unintentional biases with purposeful and regular review. There are many spaces where this work is critical. We also believe that maximizing resources, such as our student readiness plan to track student goals and interest, and vertical curricular alignment meetings for core subjects between District 211 and sender districts, will result in improved practices surrounding course placement and positive student outcomes.
While the creation of this plan was important, the critical part of the work is just beginning. Before we conclude tonight, we want to give you an overview of where we go from here. We know that equity is a journey, and that journey will likely never end. However, we want to move along the journey by addressing and improving our practices, procedures, and processes, but more importantly, our mindset. What you have before you this evening is the priorities and belief statements that make up the District 211 Equity Plan. This plan provides a framework for the implementation of specific equity work across the district and within each of our individual schools. From here, you can see that the work moves into 3 separate teams. The District 211 Equity Team will continue, but we will move into what we call the implementation phase. We will continue to oversee the work and progress defined in the priorities and belief statements. We will continue to analyze our processes and procedures as a district, including district-wide data on discipline, academics, and social-emotional health. Simultaneously, each school will have a school-based staff and student equity team, which will work on the school-specific initiatives and programs. Ultimately, this model is necessary because each District 211 school is different in terms of culture, climate, and demographic makeup. Although they only sit 4.9 miles apart, Palatine High School, with an enrollment of 47.5% Hispanic students and 36.4% white students, is very different from Fremd High School, which has an enrollment of 10.5% Hispanic students and 50.7% white students. We need to give each school the ability to tailor their programs and work to the needs of their specific populations. As you can see from the slide, each school-based team will conduct data analysis and develop programs and structures based on their current culture and their current reality. This process will begin in late July and carry through the next 3 to 5 school years. As we know that you are keenly interested in our performance and our success, we will provide you mid-year and end-of-the-year updates as we implement our work, both collectively and individually. We are truly grateful for your support as a school board. Certainly none of this work could be possible without your involvement, and we are thankful for your continued support as we move forward into the implementation phase. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have about our presentation.
Questions, comments? Mr. Dombrowski?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was informative. I had some questions earlier, and some of those were answered pretty well, so I thank you for that. My first question is, from the student perspective, obviously families come to the district for the education that we've historically developed as a community value. So with the celebration of diversity, where does the student ownership fall with embracing the established culture and the elements that unify us in the community?
Mr. Dombrowski, if I can actually start, I told our students what's the best term for this? I can't think of the word in my mind right now, but what I told them is, if you would be courageous and get in front of this board and our community in a very public setting, and tell your story and be part of this, I will try to take all the questions so you don't have to answer them. So
Sure.
can I answer that one for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more curious as far as they were going through the process, how their family support might have been and kind of what they learned about why they live within 211. But if you're willing to answer that, Mr. Schumacher, please, feel free.
Sure. I think District 211 has a rich history, right, of academic achievement, of exceptional opportunities, and so I think that's part of the draw for families to our community, certainly, and that draw and what you've heard tonight has created a very diverse community, right, that's been drawn to here, and what the students, if I can speak for them, and certainly you can answer this if you want to, but I'm just holding true to my word to you, is that some of our practices and some of the things we do haven't accelerated as fast as the diversity of our community have accelerated. And so what they're really interested in, and what the feedback from not just these two, but all the students on the committee was, I think Lydia said it best, is she wants to see herself represented in the school and in the curriculum and in the practices we do. And Prashant said it twice tonight in both of his things. And so I think that's one of the things that came out, not just for them, but for every student that's been there.
Thank you. With a lot of the priorities that are established in the plan, it seems like it's stuff that we may have already been doing. So what was the feedback on the existing procedures? Because a lot of the push to embrace this process to develop this equity plan was based on dissatisfaction of current practices.
Sure. So I think the best way to put that is, one of the things we mentioned, because the reason for creating this committee, this District 211 Equity Committee, was to say, we know that amazing work is happening individually in schools, right? And we kind of highlighted each of those things. And so each school had a little bit of a different focus. And what we found is we want a better connection and we want better collaboration across the district so that we can move these things forward more efficiently and more effectively in all of the District 11 schools. So certainly some of the things that we discussed and some of the priorities that you see here are very similar to things that we've worked on in the past, but we felt as a team that we needed to solidify them in words, solidify them in priorities, in a plan to say, this is exactly what we need to focus on moving forward, as opposed to saying, you know, Palatine's going to focus on this piece, and Schaumburg does a really good job with this piece, and Fremd is doing a really good job with this piece. It gives us a full, concrete priority, or in this case, 16 priorities, which is ultimately where we landed after a year to move those things forward.
Can you elaborate on that a little more? Because I just heard that in the presentation where we had kind of the flow chart, each school was going to cater to their students, which, if I understand correctly, the schools that are doing that currently and having success, now we're I guess I'm not following, because the illustration that you provided was the Hispanic differential in population between Fremd and Palatine, and then continuing to cater to those individual differences, but then you're saying that what's working for a majority population here is something you would want to reproduce where you don't have that majority population. So I'm a little confused with the response.
Completely understand your question and the situation, and it's not a but, it's an and, right? And so the priorities are to say, these are the strong priorities, right? And what you likely saw when you read them were, it's a broad priority, right? And there's some belief statements that then define it a little bit more, but then as we said in the last slide, those go to the school to say, the broad statement is, we need to ensure that all students have the opportunity, right? And all students have the access. And so that's the priority that the committee came up with. When it goes to the schools, in the example that we used, that may be more important for the Hispanic community at Palatine because it's a larger community. And it may be important for the Asian community at Conant because they have a large community there as well. And so it's the broad priority that says what we're going to move forward with. It's the belief statements that define it a little bit more, and then it's within the schools to say, we're going to apply this in this manner. And so everybody does the priority, everybody follows the definitive belief statements, and then the schools look at that and say, we need to do this and we need to do this.
Okay. So then, as I read the priorities for the school, family, and community partnerships, it appears that we're already doing that. How does this priority statement get implemented? It just seems like we're going to just wind up doing more of the same.
So what we found, and I think this was pandemic related, is that there was a magnification of the need for our communication methods, and there was also a magnification of deficits in our communication methods, right? Because it became so much more important last year to be able to clearly communicate and be able to communicate with all of the different diverse parts of our community. And so let's use language as an example. We want to make sure that we are communicating with our community in the multiple different languages that they speak in their homes. And so I think the pandemic put a magnification on it, and so our committee said, yes, we've been working on these, we need to work harder. Like what we've learned from this and what we learned from hearing the feedback from parents and students, and parents specifically in the focus groups to say, we don't know how to get involved in the school community, we don't really read the communications, that has led us to go, okay, what can we do from a district or a school lens with our communications to reach those parents that are telling us, we're not going to read your emails, or your emails come but they're in English, and so it means nothing. My student has to read them for me.
So then to follow up on that, with the mid-year and end-year updates, that'll be provided for success, but what are we measuring that against? If you're having trouble with parents reading emails and they continue not to read the emails, is that some metric that we can measure the success of this item?
That's our hope, yes, is that by the mid-year of the next school year, we can dive deeply into our communication procedures, and we can say, this is the feedback from our parents. This is directly what they've told us. This is what we need to address. We need a system to address it, and we need that metric to say how many people are opening our emails, right? How many people are opening the emails that we send in Spanish or Polish or whatever it becomes, so that we can know that, because we need to.
Okay. And then my final question, I think if Ms. Novak's willing, or if you're willing to speak for her, I'm not sure what your agreement there was. But
we'll see, depending on the question.
Sure. With regard to the culturally responsive instruction, what is that supposed to look like? Will it be selected curriculum, classroom material? Is it something that's going to be presented before the board? Is it structured documentation? Is it just classroom practices? It's a very vague topic that is very polarizing.
Yeah, so culturally responsive teaching is mostly a set of strategies that teachers use to establish relationships with students. That at its very base core, that's what it is. And then it moves into an instructional ideology where you are teaching in a way that you are supporting or facilitating independent learning and higher level thinking, so that students can build their capacity to learn on their own. So if you think of the idea of a teacher being a content knowledge expert and just showing students how to do a math problem, within culturally responsive teaching, you are making sure that students see problems where maybe their names are, different cultural names are included in problems, and they're seeing pictures of different individuals within their curriculum. But ultimately, the teachers are teaching students to learn. It's a metacognitive approach that's really based in science and neurology more than...
So for us, how would that look as far as being implemented successfully or not successfully?
Sure.
I mean, how would we know that this priority is implemented successfully and not in a way that might be detrimental?
So when we're facilitating students to become independent learners, things like rubrics and assessments, making sure that we're offering higher level questioning to students. So a lower level question would be something like defining or identifying. We are wanting to build students' capacity to make sure that they can function at a higher level where they're analyzing or comparing or something like that, which is why culturally responsive teaching, which is sometimes confused with other models or other thoughts that are out there that aren't even necessarily educationally related, is really more about teaching strategies.
So again, back to the point, how does that manifest?
Sure. So I can take that one. So
Sure.
manifesting itself really from a district-based lens, each school is on a different journey with this, and it's very individual to the teacher, right? And so it's based in conversations, it's based in learning, it's based in understanding. But if you're looking for, what I think you're looking for is, what does this look like in the classroom, right?
Yeah,
what
how
is
do we
the
know this is
teacher actually
working?
going to do?
Right, yeah.
So what we're going to do is, you fostered that teacher mindset to approach their class. Ms. Novak said earlier she used a math example, right? So you can approach math class as a math teacher to say, I teach numbers, right? I'm going to teach geometry, I'm going to teach the proofs, I'm going to teach this. Or you can approach it and say, I'm going to teach my students, and I'm going to structure the instructional methods, materials, and curricular choices that I make based on the makeup of my classroom. And so it's a different approach of a teacher mindset, not to approach that classroom as just teaching the numbers. It's teaching those students and really coming into that class and going, okay, how can I use those student experiences, right, which are diverse in our schools? And so not just teaching to one student in one way, but looking and going, okay, I have a very diverse culture in my classroom, and I want to make sure I can draw out the assets of all of those students. I want to use their experiences, I want to get to know their backgrounds, and I want to take that in as I'm working on my lesson plans and how I'm going to implement that. And then as Ms. Novak said, you can use some of those experiences. As Lydia shared with us, she was not a part of any studies of Asian Americans in her courses. And so that's one of those curricular pieces where one of the student choice assignments could be to write this assignment or do this assignment based on your background or your nationality. And so it's incorporating those assignments which are going to affirm the students in the class and recognize that there's a diversity to the class. So more pieces like that will lead to then more student engagement, higher levels of student thinking, and likely higher levels of student achievement. So that's what you see. And then obviously how we measure that then ultimately is student achievement.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple questions for you. Thank you, first of all, for such an elegant presentation. You guys were wonderful, the students and ex-students, and Mr. Schumacher and Ms. Nowak. Thank you very much for that. So one of the things we talk about is access in your presentation, and then you talk about some of the subcommittees that were formed with students and families. What type of outreach did you guys perform to involve some of the families, especially from a minority standpoint?
Sure. So in the original formation of the plan, we worked through the principals of each school to identify parents that had been involved in the school, and we looked for many different backgrounds and diversity with that, the same with the students. As we went down the road of engaging the community and getting the feedback, that is when the board approved our cultural and equity audit phase 1. And so B. Young and Associates worked with us to create those focus groups, and the way that they do their focus groups and structure them is homogeneously. And so we were specifically looking for Black parents and students. We were specifically looking for Hispanic parents and students, Asian parents and students, and white parents and students to participate in those. So at the school level, when the time came to have the focus groups, we sent the invitation out for any parent or student who wanted to participate to indicate their interest to us. And then from there, we collected the numbers of interests, and if the interest was too much or more than the focus group, we chose the random sample, right? Randomized the choices on it. If we didn't get enough interest to fill the focus group, which was an interesting scenario that we had a few times, is we then reached out more directly to parents and students and said, we need your voice. We want to hear your voice. Will you please be engaged in this process? And then their organization ran the focus groups for us, analyzed the data, and gave it to us.
And a follow-up to that, do you have a breakdown of the segments that did show up to these focus groups?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide that to you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I have some. First of all, thank you to everybody involved thus far and for the presenters. Excellent presentation. And thank you, Prashant. It was nice to be a part of your subcommittee and your group in putting things together. And I'm really excited to have been part of that, as most of our board members were also participating in the 4 equity subcommittees, helping develop the areas of focus and the belief and value statements of the program. So I also appreciate the diversity of those subcommittees. I can especially speak of my subcommittee. I mean, we all met at the very beginning, but then we broke into our subcommittees, and I know mine had a great perspective from many different angles. And I'm also pleased that this is ongoing. There are many opportunities. There may, I expect to see changes as things move forward, because our district is changing, our schools are changing, our community is changing. And I'm also pleased that the plan has milestones and realizations along the way, but that it is ongoing. So I look forward to further hearing more things about it as we move forward. So thank you.
Any other?
Again, thanks for the presentation. It was obviously a lot of hard work, and it was eloquently presented. A question in a moment here. What, as an overview from my perspective, you've essentially codified existing practices, okay? And you've also rolled in, I would call it discovery, from students and parents. Some of it's perception, some of it's reality, but perception is reality. What I see as lacking is that there is, I don't know where we are right now. Okay, there's no measurement right now, nor is there a goal and objective on where we want to be and what that looks like. There is nothing in the. This is a framework, not really a full-blown plan. How do I know where we're at objectively, and what does success look like, and how are you going to measure it?
So thank you for kind of giving your overview of what you've heard. These people on this committee have worked incredibly hard for 1 year. Multiple meetings per month, lots of time, lots of conversations. They put a lot of effort into creating this. And as you can imagine, when you have a diverse group of people coming together, students, parents, staff members, to try to do that, certainly my tendency, and like Mr. Dombrowski, some of those questions, and as I said in this presentation, what we had in our mind at the beginning of this is we would be sitting here with metrics and goals and numbers and dates, right, that we could give to you. And what happened in that committee is the committee went a different way, and that's what happens when you have a diverse group of people coming together. And ultimately, what they came with is we can't sit here as the District 211 Equity Committee and give a metric to every school in our district, because what we realize is every school in our district is a little bit different diversely. So what we can.
Can you remove a mask? Make sure people can hear you. Okay?
Excuse me.
Show me respect.
Excuse me. That's really out of order, please, and that's disrespectful. He is trying to speak as best he can because excuse me. Please let him continue.
So what the committee decided and brought forth was we will define the areas of priority, which is what we've explained tonight. We will provide the belief statements that our committees developed, and then we will move forward from there with 3 different teams. An implementation team from the district level, a school-based team of staff that's going to look at their particular school, their particular current reality based on their enrollment and where they're at, and then the school-based team, which is the one that really we're excited about. Students like Prashant and Lydia can continue to have a voice in what their schools do and the direction that they take, and really continue to build that agency.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that part of this should have been that leadership would have taken that and perhaps maybe waited until July, until you actually had established goals and objectives, which are objective, and that is not here. And I think that it really impacts what could be a better plan.
I would just want to add, within our subcommittee, we spent a lot of time looking at metrics and those sorts of things. And really, in where we landed is, and you said the perfect word, it is a framework. And it's not an initiative. It's not something that starts and stops. It is that regular renewal and that regular looking at practices. And where we see that the metrics are truly student success, discipline rates, all of those sorts of things are the metrics that would ultimately drive, whether or not our equity work is where it needs to be.
Will there be an account, will there be a list of metrics? Will metrics be developed per school if need be?
We're hoping that we can come back to you in December with some of those.
So this is a plan that won't be rolled out until December. There's no way to come up with metrics now? I mean, a baseline and where you want to be.
What the committee has shared and what we are presenting to you tonight is areas of priority, belief statements that schools can use, and then the forward action plan of 3 specific committees that will use this framework to move equity forward in District 211.
Not a question, but more of a comment. Again, I appreciate the work that you guys have put forward. And I don't think you can necessarily put a number to how you guys are doing without compromising the integrity of the word itself, equity. So continue to do the good work. I believe I'm going to be part of a committee coming soon. So I'll be sure to put 100% forward into it. And I think some of the change that we're going to be looking for is some things that we could measure is the amount of minorities in the classrooms and looking at their scores to see if their scores are going up, see if they're getting more involved in AP classes and things of that nature, and looking at the graduation rate, see if we have more minorities that are graduating or an increased amount of them graduating. But as of now, I don't think you can necessarily put a matrix on fairness and as it relates to equity.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got one. As it pertains to one of the priorities, diversifying the staff and personal teacher development, I think it was teacher development. Have you guys started the framework for how you plan to diversify the staff? Are there any ideas on the table? And if there are, do we have anything secondary to support those teachers of color coming into this district?
I'll give you what I think is the best one. How's that? There's a few, but this one is going along with the theme of the night, and that is to identify current District 211 students from diverse backgrounds that are interested in being educators in our district and working with them now while they're in our schools to get them involved in the education program that we currently have, to get them into the dual credit coursework, and then to continue to connect and support them through their college work. And ultimately then the desire is they would come back and teach for us. And so that's more of a long-term plan, but I think it's a really good one because it involves our current students.
And the second part was, is there anything being built to support these new teachers? Obviously, opening up the pipeline for diversifying the staff, you're going to need additional assistance in making sure they are part of the culture, correct?
Absolutely. So we're also looking at for early staff, and also I would say any staff along this equity journey, is the collective nature of allowing people time to have the conversations together and listen to each other, but also then providing mentoring support. So for our new staff, and especially our diverse staff, providing that mentoring support and that direct person to go to have the connection to learn things and to have the support of District 211 is going to be key moving forward.
Okay. And last but not least, at this time for professional development, do you have an idea of what that looks like or where it's headed at this time?
So each school has a little bit different twist on how they're going to implement their equity professional development, and I think we're going to be sharing that with you in subsequent presentations.
Perfect. Thank you.
I've got a few questions, thank you. So early in the presentation, it was mentioned that students want to have more direct access to the board, like tonight, and how valuable you found this opportunity. Appreciate your time in being here. And I'm wondering what the discussions were around what that might look like, to a pathway, or what kind of structure would be in place to allow students to have more of a voice to district administration or the board.
So I think that really using the model of the District 211 equity team, where we put a focus on the student voice, right? And I think Ms. Novak and Lydia and Prashant can share with you, when we had our full equity team meetings, when we had our committee meetings, we put the students in leadership roles to present, to share, to talk. And so continuing to find opportunities to do that, both at district level committees like this, and then there's the upcoming wellness committee, which is also going to be structured very similarly. So that's an opportunity for additional students. And then we really think that some things are going to grow out of the school-based student equity teams, because it's such a defined structure, and we're going to empower those students to create the change within their school community, but also then to work across the district, which is something that we don't really do enough of in the past, right? So the example of taking the 5 different or 7 different equity student committees that we could have, and they're doing the individual work at their schools, but we're also then bringing them together as a full district to have those conversations. We think plans like that are going to be incredibly powerful.
Great, thank you. And so this question was in regards to slide number 10, is when I'd written it down. Oh, forgive me for backing up. So I was really pleased to be part of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, but I do have a follow-up question in regards to the priorities and the belief statements, impact on critical learning standards. We had a lot of board members talk about assessment. We don't see rubrics come before us at the board desk, right? And so I'm wondering what you see as the theoretical impact of these position statements and belief statements on assessment critical learning standards.
Sure. I don't know that I see an automatic impact on critical learning standards. The only thing that really comes to mind particularly with that is some of our standards are content-based and some of them are skill-based. And when we think about our skill-based standards, there's worth, again, that cycle of review to determine, are we making sure that whatever skills that we're prioritizing are skills that require that higher level thinking, facilitate independent learning, those sorts of things. And that would almost be a regular part of the review anyway. But I don't know that I see a huge impact directly on the actual critical learning standards,
So
what we want students to know.
I apologize for
Oh, no, that's okay.
accidentally talking over you. So if I understand you correctly, it's more of adding like another layer on the already existing review, right?
Yes.
That's an ongoing process that
Yes.
it sounds like we're trying to make better and more consistent, and then adding another dimension to that, another deliberate dimension to that review then. Am I understanding?
Yeah, I think that the concept of that being deliberate is the piece that's critical.
Okay.
There.
And I only have a few more questions. I won't take up too much more of your time. So that one's kind of been covered. I was curious about who would be in charge or leading the initiative for vertical alignment with our feeder districts. What might that look like? Or is that in the planning stages at the moment?
Sure. So we do. I mean, we do existing vertical alignment. I think one of the things that we found is, in order to be more equitable, we need to do it better. And so certainly it's multi-layered, right? There's the district level, which is when I work with my colleagues from both of those districts at the curricular level. It's the principals connecting with their local principals of their feeder schools, and then our student services really working on the specific practices of how students get enrolled. And so there's really a multi-tiered approach. And what the starting point is going to be is, again, getting those people together and analyzing, okay, what have we done, right? And how has that worked? And then what do we need to change and do more effectively? And then to start to have those conversations with the feeder districts who, right, they've got their own list of things to do, but I do know that they also are interested in being more effective with us. So starting with the existing practices, putting the people in the room to talk together about what we can do better, and then working with the feeder districts to implement those procedures.
And I'm imagining that, when we're going to be brought more information, since it's a continuous process, I'm assuming then it sounds like we'll be continually updated, and this would be part of that then, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Okay, and my last question is, when we were talking about data before, I feel like, I mean, we're all very interested in quantitative data. You know, numbers are great, and anywhere we can get numbers are fantastic. But at the same time, I think a lot of what the belief statements and the priorities lend themselves to more, at this point at least, is qualitative data. I mean, that's what we collected a lot of at the beginning in reading through the expanded plan. You know, the feedback that we got from all these focus groups, which are qualitative data. So is that data collection going to also be ongoing, the qualitative data? And I know that, remember, this is largely grown out of a response to a significant push and request from our students who were pushing for this and really wanted this to happen. And that's one of the things that our students were asking for at the board meetings, was a place for qualitative data and reporting of their experiences. So is that going to be part of the process ongoing, and what might that look like?
So that one is a great topic for our student committee to start at each school and say directly from them, how do we do that? Or not really how do we do that, how do you want us to do that, right? I think is the more important question. What are you going to feel comfortable with? What method would you like us to use? And so as these student committees are formed, they're going to be the one that, as you said, they're going to continuously inform us of these pieces that we can do better, because we have an idea in our mind as adults, right? But certainly the idea that we have may not be the right fit for Lydia and Prashant to be able to feel comfortable, whether it's sharing their perceptions, experiences, or really stepping up and saying, this isn't okay in our school and we need to change it, and here's how we think we could change it. And so that's what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions, and I really appreciate your time. I competed in speech in high school, and I still wouldn't have had the courage to do what you've done tonight, so I really applaud you for being here.
Any other questions?
And if I can just say, we had a wonderful district equity team with many representatives of students, staff members, and parents. And Lydia and Prashant, you have represented them all very well. I participated in our district level meeting, and every student represented themselves, their own voice and their experiences with such poise and dedication and openness. It was really a very unusual but inspiring event to be a part of. So thank you to both of you for being here tonight, as well as Julie and Josh.
All right, but you can't leave yet. I still have a final comment. I really appreciate the students participating. This is something that I've been advocating for a number of years. I appreciate being part of the group, and I learned a lot from our students. You know, you're amazing. You listened, and I think that was important. You spoke, and you expressed your feelings, your concerns, your need to help other people to achieve it. I think that was important. I think from what I heard tonight, there were a couple of things that stood out. When you talked about the strengths, that was important to me. When you talk about it's a strength-based approach, not just of the individual, but the families, the groups, the different organizations. And I look at that as how everything comes together. So that is tremendous. Ms. Novak talked about windows and mirrors. And when you said that, I thought, you know, the mirror, how do you see yourself? And then the window is where you open up, and how do you see outside of yourself? So those are really important, and I think that's what equity is all about. You know, how do we see ourselves, and how do we see everyone around us? So I think that's terrific. I look forward to having more student involvement when we start doing our strategic plan, and maybe even further than that, of having the input, because I think it's vital that we all work together, because this is our district and it's important to us. So we want to see everyone achieve, and we need to help them along. And the last thought is listening. That is truly the key. We listen to you. You listen to the board, you've taken the comments that have been made, and our sincere goal is to make this a good plan. So you've got some questions and comments from the boards that you could take back and move forward with it. So I think all that is part of that communication. So again, I thank you also for being here, for the presentation. It was amazing. Thank you. Now you guys can leave.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And we're going to continue on with, the next item of business is consent agenda items. I've been asked that two of the items be removed from the consent agenda, which would be letter D and letter E. Are there any other items?
No, it's C and E. C and E. The financial report and the variance report.
Okay. You sent it to me. Okay, not a problem. All right, so it would be with the exception of letter C, which would be the financial report, and letter E, the variance report. All right, are there any other items that you would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Okay, if there are no others, then the recommended action is that the consent agenda be approved with the exception of letter C and letter E as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. All right, and then we'll take a look at letter C, the financial report, and the recommended action would be that the financial report as of May 31, 2021 be accepted as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Yeah, can you put item C, the financial report, up on the screen? These questions, did you get the questions that I sent?
I did.
Okay, so it might be helpful if we could take a look at the financial.
That would take us a few minutes.
How about on the computer? Would you be able to pull it up on your computer? It's right there.
Well, I mean, I have copies.
We all have it in front of us.
Okay, well, okay, all right. The question one, and again, obviously, these are numbers, and there's no approval or disapproval. I believe that the numbers are accurate. What is the current fund balance and the percentage-wise as of the end of this report?
Well, we would measure our true fund balance is measured per board policy as of June 30th each year. So the last set of final fund balance figures that we have are 41% for our combined operating funds and 36% in our educational fund, which excludes non-spendable funds, which is allocated in the policy.
So we're at 41% fund balance as of the end of May?
No, that was as of June 30th, 2020, which is the point at which it's measured every year. So we have not measured it for this year.
On the current report, if that were the end of the year, what would our fund balance be?
If we were to project forward, and again, our fund balance is measured on an accrual basis, so I can give an estimate. It will not be exact until we have our audited figures. Including the land sale, we would be at roughly 52% in our operating funds and 40% in our educational fund.
Okay. And the calculation, is it the aggregate of all sources of funding, state, local, and property taxes? Or state, federal, and property?
Yes, it is our total fund balance, again, on an accrual basis, and it excludes non-spendable assets such as our building trades assets.
The three categories.
But it would include all of our sources, yes.
Okay. I was interested to know what the projected fund balance would be at the end of June, but you're not a moderator.
That's what I just shared.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, the 52 and the 52%, 40%?
52 and 40, correct.
Oh, okay. Are federal COVID funds, for the lack of a better word, included in these reports?
The funds that we have received are included in the revenue section. We've received about $830,000 thus far for between the CARES Act and our FEMA grant. So they are included in the revenue that you see right now.
So they would be included in the federal section, in the federal category?
Correct.
Okay. I'm familiar with moving money around and rules and that sort of stuff. Are the COVID funds, are they fenced? are there specific things that money can only be spent on?
Yes.
What are some of those things?
Yeah, sure. They are relief funds for the pandemic. So they are to be used for things such as social emotional supports, learning remediation, things such as PPE and sanitation supplies, technology supplies, things that are used to either support the learning in the operational environments during the pandemic or to provide the remediation services thereafter.
I assume we already have a budget item for social emotional learning. Is that somewhere a line item in the big book?
Sure. I mean, our counselors, our psychologists, those types of supports are all budgeted.
Does the federal money come in and kind of free up that money to be spent someplace else, or does it have to be spent in that? So is it an aggregate of both what we budgeted and what the federal money is going to provide?
It's not to supplant our current services, it's to add additional services.
If there is a surplus, which there probably not going to be, how would that, if there were surplus and it was attributed to I don't know how you keep track of federal money and local money. If there was a surplus in the federal funding, would that money have to be returned to the federal government, or could we keep it?
It is a reimbursement. So we would submit the expense for the initiative or the supplies that we would have, and that would be reimbursed to us.
Okay, so it's a pay-as-you-go.
Yes. So there are.
They essentially provide a grant amount, and then that's what you can spend up to. And if you don't give them receipts for spending, they don't get the rest of the money.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then as a
That's how all of our grants work. All of our title grants, Perkins, CTI, are just as Lauren described for the ESSER funds.
Good to know. I mean, it's a pay-as-you-go. The for clarity on the second page of the financials, there's a graph, which is fairly useful, but I wonder if you could include a couple of different data points. One of them would be a line, and it wouldn't necessarily be a straight line across, because it would be a relative line, and it's relative to the current funding we have of what the fund balance would be in a percentage, and the 33%. It would be both. The line would represent percentage-wise, but I would also like to know what the dollar amount would be. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be kind of an increasing line as it goes.
So Lauren, if you could, let me try and clarify what I'm hearing. Lauren, the actual fund balance amounts are listed in this bottom chart if I'm looking looking at it properly.
Yes, if I can take a moment just to explain what is in this chart. The financial statement that's provided here is for the financials as we have them through the end of May. Every month, the board gets new updated information as of that point in time. So what we do is we provide a historical perspective with the fund balance at that point in time over the past several years so that you can see that trend. As I mentioned, the fund balance is tracked on an annual basis as of June 30. So the point of measure relative to the policy, and I'll give you an example, when we, because we receive our property tax installments in two main installments over the course of the year, there are times where our fund balance is very high, and then we continue to spend it down over the next several months until we get our next installment, and it goes up and down. So it's not an accurate representation if we're measuring it mid-year to say where it is relative to our policy.
Well, but you've graphed it, okay, operational and educational fund. I think it's easy to graph a simple, not necessarily a simple process, to give us a point of reference, okay? How far above or below the line is the red line and the blue line? Okay, that would be helpful rather than trying to have to figure it out. It would be helpful.
I think what you can, and I can certainly put together an option to see if it would be meaningful. But again, the point of reference, and it would be somewhat of a straight line over that 12-month window of period through June 30th. And you're going to see that what actually happens is that our operating and educational fund balance vary from that point throughout the year. But ultimately, by June, you will see where they are relative to our
Well,
fund balance
understand it.
policy.
This would help kind of coordinate the variance report with the finance report. It just another kind of
Sure.
symmetrical. Then you on the chart here, you have dollar amounts.
Yes.
Could you, in parentheses, put what that is relative, what that fund balance is, is it 25%, 50%, just so we don't have to do math?
And you're talking about 8% over next year's planned expenditures?
Well, I'm looking at Mr. Bradley's thing here. In May of 19, you've got a data point of $123,800,000, the red line, and 887 for the blue line. If you could put a percentage of the what that value means, is the fund balance 33%? Is it 50%? That would be helpful as well. So those are my comments. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Right. So do you have clarity then of the possibility of what Mr. Kramer is asking for, or?
I do, thank you. I will work on making some meaningful additions to that and make sure that it is meeting the
And I'm
intention we're
available
looking at.
if you need to ask me a question. What was I really saying? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we need to
All right.
vote on those.
I know, just, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, a roll call, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. All right, and the next is the variance report, and the recommended action is that the variance report as of May 31, 2021 be accepted as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Kramer, you have some questions on it?
No. I wanted to wrap them up together.
All right. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, then roll call, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. All right, then that brings us to Freedom of Information requests, and that is an information item. The next is the 2021-2022 tentative budget for the Illinois Municipal Retirement, Social Security, and Working Cash Funds. Any questions in regards to that?
If I may, this is the beginning of a 4-month budget process. We're beginning with the IMRF Social Security Working Cash Fund is presented to you this evening. In July, the Transportation Fund will come forward. And in August, the Operations and Maintenance, as well as the Educational Fund, and then the tentative budget as a whole will come forward to the board in August, looking for approval in September.
Okay. And the next is an informational item on post-bond insurance compliance report.
District 211 made its final bond payment back in November of 2017 and has remained debt-free since then. This is the final compliance report that we have to put forth because of the sale of the life safety bonds back in December of 2012 and January of 2013 require this final compliance report.
Okay. Any questions in regards to that? All right. If not, then we move on to the unfinished business. The first item is the recommended action is that the Board of Education approve the Board of Education protocols as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Present.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
No.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. Thank you. I think these are really important, and as we go forward, this is the expectation of how the board presents itself respectfully and to one another. All right, the next item is the proposed policy revision, BD school board meetings, and the recommended action is that the board policy BD school board meetings be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah, you know, I'm on the policy committee. I commented on this last time. I'm going to vote yes for it, but it's a qualified yes, because I think that we've missed the mark by not including the ability to have public comments via Zoom. Whether or not they're hard to hear or not, I think it's just another way that we might be cutting off communication with the community. It takes a lot of courage, quite frankly, to one, appear before the board and make comments, much less put together thoughts to come over, you know, over Zoom. So, I mean, I would hope that at some point in time, we might want to revisit that.
I would add something to that also. There were several instances where people had signed up on Zoom and then they did not show up when it was their turn. And that made a difference, I believe, in the amount of time available to those who did come
Well,
and speak. So,
the same thing could happen. People could sign up for public comments and not choose to make them. So it's
okay.
6 of one, half dozen of another.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. Okay, and the next item is action item that the board policy DJC bidding requirements be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
I believe at the meeting this was first read, we requested sort of like why we had a board member there and sort of the historical purpose of the board member attending. I haven't seen anything relative to a response on that.
Sure, I can speak to that. There was no historical references in our records regarding why it was added. When asked, several veteran staff members who have been involved with the policy for a long time, the hypothesis was that there was a board member at the time that was very interested in participating in the bidding process and so wanted to have that added in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, again, same comment as before. The policy existing before the one change was adequate, okay, which basically said a board member, if available, would be present. You know, I think that there really is, this policy does not need to be rewritten. Perhaps re-ratified, but not rewritten.
And in response to that, the previous policy, the current policy does not say a board member, it says a designated member of the Board of Education. And I think one of the impetuses for revising it was that there was not a designated member who stepped forward wanting to be that designated member.
Should any board member want to attend the bids, we can certainly keep you informed of when they are, and you can attend those bid openings.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Present.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. All right, and the next recommended action item is that the board policy file JOA, use of educational technologies and student data privacy and security, be adopted as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is new business, and the recommended action is that the Board of Education approve the District 211 Equity Plan as presented. May I have a roll call, please, or a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the work and the time and energy that has gone into that. And I do look forward to seeing the development continue with something tangible in the future.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm going to vote present because I'm ambivalent about this. I do think that this plan is not specific enough, and I really think that in order to call it a plan, we do need to have measurable outcomes, which this plan does not have.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Present?
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item, the recommended action is that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent or their designee to enter into an agreement with B. Young Associates to provide professional services to Township High School District 211 to conduct an equity and cultural audit at a cost not to exceed $49,500. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, same thing. I don't think we need to go to phase 2 until we've completed phase 1. And phase 1 is not completed until we have measurable outcomes.
Any other comments?
I disagree with that. I think it's pretty clear that you need phase 2 in order to get the metrics that you're talking about.
I didn't understand what you said. I can't hear you.
I disagree with you. I think phase 2 is necessary to lead to the kind of metrics that you're asking for.
Yeah, that's why we vote.
I'm aware.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
No.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. All right, the next item is that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution providing for interfund transfer of $4 million from the working cash fund to the operations and maintenance fund effective after July 1, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is, the recommended action is that the Board of Education secure treasurer bonds for Barbara Peterson as school treasurer and Lauren Hummel as assistant school treasurer of Township High School District 211 in the amount of $15,248 per bond, total $30,496. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. Thank you. The next action item is that the Board of Education continue the self-insured program for health and dental benefits for 2021-2022 and retain Blue Cross and Blue Shield to provide claims administration services for medical, dental, and utilization review, and further to purchase aggregate and specific stop-loss insurance from Blue Cross and Blue Shield at a level of $350,000 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Quick question. Did we shop around for these services, or do we just sole source with Blue Cross?
We did get quotes from multiple providers.
How many providers for this cycle?
There were 4.
4? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Creamer.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is that the Board of Education approve a one-year agreement with Panorama Education at a cost of $107,000. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
I actually do have
Okay.
a couple of questions. So when I was looking at the order here, one of the things that, and I forgive not forwarding this question beforehand, I only reviewed it earlier this morning. So one of the tools given to teachers and staff are social emotional learning surveys or screeners. But I'm wondering if those sorts of tools are optional or if those are like compulsory. Like are those, do you happen to know if they're assigned or they're just
Sure, I can speak.
students opt in or opt out of taking such surveys?
Sure, I can speak to that. The way we're going to operationalize the survey tool is to utilize the valid, reliable surveys that Panorama has developed, and we would like to be able to track social emotional data over the course of the year. And so we're going to utilize the wellness courses who teach some of these concepts, and as they're in the curricular part where they're teaching the concepts so the students understand what they are, we're going to implement the surveys into that class. Now, certainly, there's always an opt-out opportunity for a student or a parent who doesn't want their student to take that survey, that they could opt out of it.
Okay, thank you. And the only other thing I was curious about here on the, again, the staff tools, it says ongoing integration of SAT, PSAT, Access, and AP assessments into the student success platform. Is there, can you give me a little bit more information about what that means and what that looks like?
Absolutely. So the student success platform specifically pertains to one portion of it, and that portion is going to allow us to organize our multi-tiered systems of support, or our RTI and learning support teams. And so within that, we're excited about the ability to track our interventions all in one space. And so while we have multiple tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions now, it's tough to track them in one spot, right? So this gives us the ability to track them in that spot, to track the student progress and engagement. And then it also integrates with Infinite Campus, so it allows us to then pull in and look at, is there a correlation between attendance? Is there a correlation between behavior in some of the things that we're looking at? And so it'll allow us to correlate better to the individual group of students. And the hope is that with the ability to do that analysis, we can even more tailor those interventions to the students.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, roll call, please.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Creamer.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is the sale of surplus items. The recommended action is that the Board of Education authorize the sale of a Miller Econo Twin HF welder, 2 Miller dial arc welder 250s, folding cafeteria tables, an art lamp, a Tennant 5700 XP carpet extractor, and an Advance Aqua Max auto floor scrubber by way of public sealed bid, public auction site, or company trade-in. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, roll call.
Mr. Creamer.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is the renewal of Employee Assistance Program. The recommended action is that the Board of Education approve the continuation of the Employee Assistance Program services to be provided by Workplace Solutions from July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022, at a cost of $1.62 per employee per month, and further authorize the superintendent or designee to sign the contract with Workplace Solutions for these services. May I have a roll call, please?
Motion.
A motion, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Creamer.
Aye.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is the action item that the Board of Education approve the pre-approval form for future expense reimbursement for Kimberly Cavill to attend the Triple I Conference November 19th to 2021, and Anna Klemkowitz to attend the Triple I Conference November 19th to 2021, including the pre-conference workshop as submitted. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, roll call?
Mr. Rosenblum.
Aye.
Mr. McGowan.
Aye.
Mr. Creamer.
Present.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski.
No.
Ms. Cavill.
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Aye. The next item is potential topics for future discussion. Are there any topics?
Yeah, we heard some comments today. What was that bill, 818?
818.
Can we put that on the agenda for the next meeting, please? It seems to be a pretty pressing topic.
That bill has not yet become law,
It's sitting on the governor's desk right now.
but it is not yet law.
We can take a position on, we need to come up with a position on what we might want to do, should it become law.
All right, let's take a look at, you're making a recommendation for a future topic. Let's poll the board and see if this is something they would like on the agenda. Let me have a consensus, Tim, or Mr. McGowan? Would you like to see it on the agenda?
No.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Ms. Cowell?
No.
Mr. Rosenblum?
No.
Yes.
Not at this time.
Okay, so it will not be coming forward at this time, and it might come at a later time. Okay? Thank you.
Do we need to discuss masking moving into the fall?
If I can,
go ahead,
the
please.
information that I gave the board today is the latest information that I have from the IDPH in terms of masking.
Right, understood. And if we as a board decided to deviate from those recommendations, that's something that we could potentially do, correct?
We have had this discussion before, and we would bring forth again the information from our attorneys in terms of the steps that you take.
Correct, right. And I appreciate the recommendation and the data collection and all of the references to all of the conflicting direction and guidance. But at the end of the day, we've seen a significant outcry regarding the masks. I've had parents calling me wondering if they should pull their schools or the students from our schools strictly over mask mandates. And I think it's worth discussing if we want to deviate from the guidance that is existing.
So are you suggesting we discuss at a future board meeting masking or our compliance to guidelines regarding, we could talk about masking, we could talk about vaxxing, we could talk about social distancing, we could talk about remote versus in-person learning and qualifications. We could talk about a variety of different things.
Correct, and you're welcome, Mr. Rosenblum, to suggest any of those other things. I'm specifically asking for a discussion about masks.
And how it relates to the guidelines, or?
If we would wish as a district to continue following the guidelines, or if we would wish to deviate from whichever guidelines we're following at the moment. And again, that may change between now and the next meeting, but if it doesn't, or if there's further confusion, or if there's further movement by a majority of other districts doing the same, I don't see the issue if it becomes moot with giving it some time.
All right, is there support for that being a discussion?
Are we doing just what we did
Let's
before?
just do what we did before. This time I'll start at this end. Mr. Bradley?
I'd like a little bit more clarification. One of the things you mentioned was that which guideline we're following. From my understanding, we're following one guideline.
We do. Well, we follow the IDPH, the Cook County Department of Public Health,
Correct.
the Illinois State Board of Education, and in athletics, it's the IHSA. If there's been any conflict with the guidance, which there has been before, that has been brought to the board for a decision.
And I didn't see the memo, so currently what are we following and what's our mask mandate?
So currently, and I'm going to have Mr. Schumacher read the list.
I'm just going to read it straight off their information so I don't mess it up. During the school day, This is from the IDPH guidance, the most recent version of the IDPH guidance for schools. During the school day, all persons on school grounds, including students, teachers, school nurses, administrative and secretarial staff, food service personnel, custodial staff, public safety personnel, etc., must wear a face covering at all times when in school or in transit to and from school via group conveyance, i.e. school buses, unless a specific exemption applies. The face covering should have 2 or more layers to stop the spread of COVID-19 and should be worn over the nose and mouth, secured under the chin, and should fit snugly against the sides of the face without gaps. Now, there is a additional document that the IDPH has put out, which is a frequently asked questions document, which is updated more frequently, and it has most recently been updated on June 7th of 2021. The frequently asked question number 35 in this document says, can face coverings be removed at certain times? And the answer to that is yes. Face coverings may be temporarily removed at school when eating, when playing a musical instrument outdoors with at least 6 feet physical distancing, when using a face shield when other methods of protection are not available or appropriate, while children are napping with close monitoring to ensure that no child leaves their designated napping area without putting their face covering back on, for staff when alone in classrooms or offices with the door closed, for fully vaccinated staff when meetings with other fully vaccinated staff outside of settings where unvaccinated persons are present, and the new one is for students and staff when they are outdoors. However, particularly in areas of substantial to high transmission per the CDC COVID data tracker or IDPH's COVID-19 county and school metrics, staff and students who are not fully vaccinated should wear a mask in crowded outdoor settings or during activities that involve sustained close contact with other people who are not fully vaccinated. So that's the in schools. During our athletic practices, the IDPH has updated their document as of June 11th. And it's specific to athletic practices and competitions, not school day or classrooms. During athletic practices, individuals who are fully vaccinated against the virus that causes COVID-19 may resume sports-related activities without wearing masks or maintaining physical distance for all sports. Individuals who are not fully vaccinated should continue to wear a mask during sports-related activities for sports played indoors. And individuals who are not fully vaccinated may resume sports-related activities without wearing masks for any sport played outdoors. So we've got the school day, classroom, in the building, coming to the building, entering, leaving the building, wearing masks. And then we've got the athletic practices and competitions where, dependent upon vaccinated or not, or indoors or outdoors, different guidelines apply.
And Mr. Dombrowski, you would like to have this for discussion in a future meeting?
Ideally, yes.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes. The fly in the ointment here is a underlying precept that people have to disclose whether or not they've been vaccinated. I don't know we can ask that question.
We are not currently asking people to show proof.
If someone doesn't say anything, they don't have to wear a mask. I mean, that's a nuance and why we probably need to discuss this. I'm not asking for a
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I want to discuss.
Mr. Rosenblum?
So to clarify, it sounds like our mask discussion may go into other areas of COVID compliance. Is that?
Well, probably the law, because HIPAA protects certain medical information from having to be disclosed or even asked of certain people. Nobody can ask me whether or not I've been vaccinated. If they do, I say no, I'm not going to tell you.
So if Mr. Kramer is interested in having conversation around vaccination and protocols associated to that related to masking, then I'd like to ask if the possible item for future discussion is not just about masks, but about COVID compliance.
That seems to me to be the actual item, not like, are we going to follow the guidelines or not?
So
I feel like it was inaccurate before. That's the real question. Do you want to have a discussion on the agenda about whether or not we're going to follow the Department of Public, like the guidelines.
Which filters down to whether we're going to have masks or not masks.
Right, but it comes back to, we follow the guidelines. We've been following the guidelines.
Right.
So I'm comfortable following the guidelines. And that seems to be the real question, not whether we're going to wear masks or not, because we are already, it's already talking about vaccination and now HIPAA. That's not about masks. That's about whether or not we're following guidelines, which is really about, like, are we going to deviate from the guidelines?
Okay, so we've kind of gone from masks to guidelines to a whole COVID compliance. And I don't know if that's really where we want to end up going, because we could be all over the place here. And there's certain things that we probably can't do.
I'd like a definitive legal opinion on whether or not we can even ask the question, or whether students or faculty or staff have to disclose whether or not they've been vaccinated. If you don't have to disclose that, then you don't have to wear a mask.
From my understanding, we're not asking students or staff if they've been vaccinated or not. I think in that statement, if they showed up to a sporting event without a mask, the assumption is that they've been fully vaccinated. We're following the same guidelines at my place of business
Well, again, that's
tomorrow.
why it needs to be discussed.
I am very confused now about what topic is being proposed to add to the future discussion.
Again, my original intention was to add the use of masks. We can discuss that. It could be something where masks are optional or mandatory. That would be where the discussion may fall. The other items, or if we eliminate mask requirements at all. I mean, it doesn't make sense that we would incentivize students to get vaccinated if they're between the ages of 12 and 16, if then they see no benefit and they're still required to wear masks indoors.
And just for clarification, my yes was a discussion for mask or not.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe let's get back to that. Just a discussion about, whether they can wear the masks or not. The HIPAA law, I mean, that's something we may not be able to control. All right. Mr. Bradley is in favor of a discussion on masks. Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblum?
I'm going to abstain because I feel that a discussion on masks is too narrow, and the discussion will not stay there.
Okay. Ms. Cavill?
No, I'm happy following the guidelines.
Okay. Mr. Dombrowski, you've made the...
Absolutely in favor of the discussion.
Okay. Mr. McGowan?
I'll entertain a conversation, but IDPH sets the guidelines, so I don't think it's going to stay that narrow, but I'm willing to have a conversation.
All right. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and you're abstaining. 1, 2, 3. I've got 4. All right. So we'll have the conversation about the mask. We will keep it to that topic, and if we need to, we will set a time limit for it.
Right.
And maybe by that time, it may already be resolved.
Exactly.
And then one other additional item outside of that, we're still using health screeners, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the guidance was that we can discontinue using that, right? It's optional
No,
for us?
the guidance was to discontinue using temperature screening, but the self-assessment of the wellness screener is still in the guidelines.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the next item is our committee reports. I will begin with NSSCO very briefly. I will try. At our meeting on June 2nd, we celebrated a number of individuals that were retiring. Also, the budget was approved by all of the member districts, and we celebrated several graduations, and the graduations were outside. Dr. Hackett did give us some reports on federal and state updates. There's Senate Bill 517, talks about the high cost of special education funding commission. They're creating a Senate commission that's going to focus on reviewing the current system, the needs of high-cost students, other state funding structures for special education, and taking a look at various proposals for it. That recommendation is supposed to be provided to the Senate then by November 30th of 2021. Another item is the age 22 end of the school year. That's being extended, so the student who has their birthday in the middle of the year usually ages out the day after their 22nd birthday. Now they can stay to the end of the school year. There's also a House bill on Senate education maximum age, and what that one is covering and talking about, it provides that students who turn 22 during the time of the student's in-person instruction was suspended for 3 months during the pandemic or more as a result of the pandemic would be eligible for services through the 2021-2022 school year. Uncertain about any kind of funding or how that will affect the districts, but NSSEO is definitely taking a look at that. NSSEO also had a number of students that were registered for their summer program. The kids are participating in that. It was touch and go with having enough of the TAs. They were able to find enough teacher assistants and have the staff, so that has worked out. And the other day, Timber Ridge School, which is the school for behavioral students, we've been saving for a gym. It's been the last 5 years. They've finally broken ground. There was a ceremony at the school. You know, you have your shovels and the hard hats. The kids came out. They got into the picture. They had an opportunity to do that. They were very excited. There was a drone flying over it, and that's going to be part of their educational process of kind of monitoring this. And the kids were just really excited. And, you know, when you talk about equity, these kids, you know, come from districts that have gyms, and we haven't had that over at Timber Ridge. And they'll also have an elevator, which will allow then parents to come upstairs, or kids that would require an elevator for being able to get around. So that's really exciting. So it's begun. They're working on it, and we'll just keep watching the progress. So that's it for NSSEO. And Mr. Rosenblum, EdRed, please.
Thank you. So EdRed held their meeting just a couple days after our last one, or maybe the day after our last one, on May 18th, June 18th, May 18th. May 18th, they had their last meeting. And it was an opportunity to meet the new executive director who just started. So a lot of their discussion was around end of legislative session items, and a lot of items that they were advocating for were not brought up in the last session, and they did not meet the deadline to be brought up. So they're hoping that they come back in the fall when legislation returns to have those discussions. One of those items was our very own district's legislative request regarding refund and abatement to our taxpayers. So that did not get brought forth for discussion, let alone for a vote. So the plan is to have that come back in the fall. So that's good on that. They promoted a webinar being sponsored by Franzik, the attorney organization that a lot of school districts use, including ourselves. They're having a webinar on June 22nd on diversity, equity, and inclusion. How timely is that, right, with today's presentation? So anybody who'd like to attend that can register on their website. And thank you, Mrs. Klimkowitz, for mentioning the aging out of special education. That was very heavily discussed because of the passing of that legislation and the impact that it's going to have on districts, on the secondary districts across, and the whole districts, the consolidated districts across the state. So a lot of discussion on that. And there was dialogue between the people that were in attendance as well. So it wasn't just listening to them talk to us about things that passed, but there was a lot of conversation around that. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. The next is the review of, there's the upcoming calendar. Our next board meeting is going to be July 15th. Then we are going to go back into closed session. The recommended action is that the board enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Cavill?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. All right, we ask that the board return to open session. It's 10:34, and may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Okay, hold on, let me get the, thank you. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Mrs. Cavill? Aye. Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Ms. Klimkowitz?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is retirement requests, and the motion is that the Board of Education accept the retirement requests of the following staff members. Stephen Balsey, effective June 2024, according to the master contract of District 211 Teachers Union. Jennifer Haas, effective 2025, according to the master contract of the District 211 Teachers Union. Vin Lee, effective May 2025, according to the master contract of the District 211 Teachers Union. Deborah Palkey, effective May 2022, consistent with the master contract of the District 211 United Support Staff. Connie Ron, effective May 2025, according to the master contract of District 211 Teachers Union. And Lisa Small, effective June 2025, according to the superintendent's performance-based contract. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Mrs. Cavill? Aye. Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Kramer?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz?
Aye. With no other business coming before the board, the board president declares this meeting of the Board of Education adjourned.